joined yet?
Yeah, I see his name on the list of
Oh, okay.
participants.
Is
Yeah,
it
he's there.
Okay, so what I'm proposing to do is just show this like a 5, 6, I may go up to 7-minute video that sort of highlights some of the bullet points, nothing profound. I'm assuming you've already listened to the video or know the issues anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and play it and hope for the best. Oh, somebody. Victoria came in and out again. Okay. Let me see. Slideshow.
I just wanted to give
Got it.
a quick overview of the background of Katherine Stewart's book. It's a result of investigative journalism over decades. She's basically done a lot of fly-on-the-wall observational case studies all over the country, and as well as content analysis of journalistic articles. Here I've just put together this image of a bunch of leaves, each leaf representing some aspect of religious nationalism's core political ideology. And these are all thoughts of Katherine Stewart, not mine. She says that what we need to understand is...
Oh God, what happened?
That what we need to understand is that there's a new elite based in whose ideology is religious nationalism.
Are you able to listen to it still?
She also talks about the...
Oh God. Sorry, I'm going to start again. I'm so sorry.
She also talks about the organizational ecosystem or the terrarium.
Sorry, technical difficulties.
Oh.
It's okay. It's going to start again. It's just, I think I wasn't sharing my screen. Were you?
I just wanted to give a quick overview of the background of Katherine Stewart's book. It's a result of investigative journalism over decades. She's basically done a lot of fly-on-the-wall observational case studies all over the country, and as well as content analysis of journalistic articles. Here I've just put together this image of a bunch of leaves, each leaf representing some aspect of religious nationalism's core political ideology. And these are all thoughts of Katherine Stewart, not mine. She says that what we need to understand is that there's a new elite based in whose ideology is religious nationalism. And in fact, they are just a power elite constituting, people like Betsy DeVos, the Michigan princes, that own carrot farms or dairies or Amway. So she has a whole list of different types of business people, real estate, etc., who are right-wing religious people. And she says that they use religious ideology to solidify their power. They adhere to economic libertarianism, a la Milton Friedman, following all the tenets of free, unbridled capitalism. They're for gun regulation, deregulation rather. They even go so far as to say that God is devoted to deregulation. Their aim is to fuse the church and the state, basically get rid of the separation of the church and the state by saying that God is their only true governor, and the Bible is their only, the laws that they have, the book whose laws they're going to follow. So they claim that they want to put in politicians and laws that support the kingdom of Jesus. They are definitely against public schools. They feel that that's sort of a place where they actually
I'm just checking. It looks like somebody else came in, but they're not.
They say secular humanism is taught, and hence they're much prefer private segregated home schools where religion can be taught. In terms of the particular issues that they gather around, it's abortion. Of course, they feel that tax dollars should not be given to killing babies. And it's very interesting to read about how this was a platform that came that with Phyllis Schlafly, the movement was able to come together against feminism. They want women subservient in the home. They're against LGBTQ rights. They feel that it's an abomination. They feel that slavery is the divine origin of slavery is correct, and that the separation of the races should be maintained. They have courted Latinx people who are religious in mega churches. She interviews people in California, and she claims that the lines are being redrawn to include certain people of color who will toe the line. This entire ideology she traces back to Christian Reconstructionists like Rushdoony, where the world is divided into pure and impure. And so if you conform, you'll be an insider to the U.S. as a redeemer nation. So those are very, very quickly what she goes over in terms of the main ideological core of the religious right. She also talks about the organizational ecosystem, or the terrarium in which the religious right plays. And here's some strategies that they use. There's a huge organizational network. One of the biggest elements of this network is a family research council, and they claim to have 25,000 pastor members. They offer training, and they suggest the use of culture impact teams, CITs, through the churches, and they propose that these CITs be used as shadow political cells to subvert America's constitutional democracy. So Stewart says, rings the bell loud. They're loud and clear. This is a red flag. We need to do something. These people are getting more and more power. The religious right in various organizations, which sometimes come together, have adopted certain strategies. One is a legal blitz, where they put forward a barrage of similar legal bills to confound the states so that they will be overwhelmed with these bills, and eventually one or two may pass, slowly sort of chipping away at our democracy. In terms of media, they're big into radio, satellite religious programming. Many of them are radio hosts. It was a platform that they used to get people's minds and hearts. They also hold prayer meetings in the halls of power for politicians. There are weekly meetings, there are annual huge prayer meetings. You're probably all familiar with that. So what Stewart also says is that organizations that are in the religious right provide all kinds of resources for pastors, including sort of canned sermons and guides for parishioners on how to vote. The literature is already pre-prepared, and these churches are used to disseminate the literature. So I thought I'd say a few things to remind us of what Katherine Stewart is saying. So she says, our democracy is really at risk. We do need to be aware that these organizational techniques are being used quite effectively by the right wing, not to say that they're not being used by others. But the ideology is what she finds extremely dangerous. It's completely anti-democratic, anti-constitutional. So there you go.
Okay. Thank you for humoring me. I thought instead of actually having to speak about it, I pre-recorded it. So our rules are people can speak for 3 minutes and then we can go for a second round. So I'm really eager to hear what you all have to say. I'm going to shut up now and just moderate. You can all unmute yourselves if you want.
Yeah, I went out and bought the book.
Oh.
I have it here on Kindle, and read about the first 5% of it or so. And I'm going to read the rest of it because it's really good. One of the things I got out of these first 30 pages or so is that I'd always thought of the religious right as being conservative and that they were really adhering to principles. But what's depicted in the book, and I think it's supported. I expect to find it supported in the rest of the pages of the book, is that it's not really so much about principles. I guess the people that are doing that aren't very intellectual anyway. Mm-hmm. But they're also they're more into the power aspect of the thing. It's an insult to them that you have people that are talking and squawking in this democracy that are not like them and don't share their simplistic ideals that they have. Mm. These first 30 or so pages gave me the impression they're all kind of these authoritarian personality types that like to look back to the New England Patriots, not the football team, but the original ones, and they kind of glorified them, and then the Jonathan Edwards style preachers, and then everyone came here for religious reasons, and so they have this picture, and they just want to fight against whatever insults them. You don't find any depth of Christianity among. It's supposed to be Christian, but there's no depth of Christianity. You have these people preaching these Joel Osteen types of, well, if you go with God, God will bring you great riches. Success, it'll be the big payoff. And so it's they're sort of selling it to people that are clueless, people that are follower types. They sell that to them that this will just be one-stop shopping for everything you want if you sign on with this thing, and then they get these people in there, and they get political power, and then they say in their mega churches or in their small Baptist churches on the country road, and they're quite well coordinated with this because of what you said about the ecosystem, that they're all exchanging information and energy with each other. And so they're chalking up feathers in their caps and notches on their gun belts for things that they have achieved here based on these single issue things, the abortion and whether they can teach Jesus in schools, and these very strident themes that they have. They don't really need to have that, but that's their thing, and they're doing it for power. And one of the things that I read in these first 30 or so pages was that you mentioned the boss. I mean, these rich people that are putting money into this, and I guess you have rich people that die with bad consciences, and so they bequeath a lot of money to a foundation that's supposed to carry these things on, and so it kind of takes on its own momentum as well. And some of the people that are doing this, of course, are doing it for not for the keys to heaven, but they're just doing it for money. That they want the power that you can get, and they find ways to churn their religion that they're trying to foist on us, turn that into money for themselves to build up their families. But it's kind of a pernicious thing. It's a self-catalyzing thing, and has certain respectability to it because it harks back to Christianity, but that doesn't really stand the test of daylight when it's shown on that, shined on it. That's pretty darn bad.
What's the name of the book?
Yeah, can you recite it for us, Glima? It's Power Worshippers, colon, and then it has after that what is it, religious right or something like that. Let me push the button and get it. And she's Kathleen, Kathalene.
No, Katherine.
Cathar.
INE.
Are you sure? You got it down there?
Got it.
Okay, right. And then Stewart, Stewart.
Thank
you.
you.
The only one on Amazon, and it's on Kindle. It's the book's $13, but it's well worth the $13. I can attest to that just for the hour and a half or so that I've spent with this. I mean, this is going to be my next 10 hours of pleasure reading.
Selva?
Yeah, I wanted to address, came out in the video that I saw about the education. And I kind of saw a vision of this happening 25 years ago when I visited my brother up in Grants Pass, Oregon, which is a very wealthy area where the wealthier people from California who felt that the Californians were too liberal were moving to, and they had a pocket there of people. And I went to a very fancy dinner party where I shocked everyone because everyone was dissing public education. And I included my brother because I never really thought I would have to do this at a dinner party, because they were actually advocating to tear out parts of books because the books were teaching and spoiling their children's value system, and they were all homeschooling, and that was their big thing. And in the video, it showed how these people are very smart now. They can tap into it. And some of these schools are private schools that know how to get public funding to fund this and to teach these children, you know, that to be righteous and respectful, and that women take second position in the home and so forth. So that was really, really scary to me. And I remember I put my foot into it and I said, I'm sorry, there are 25 people here. I'm a product of public education, and so is my brother. And their mouths fell. And I said, and I do think that I wholeheartedly believe that everyone individual is entitled to publication, and that's the only way that we will survive a democracy where everyone feels equal and has equal opportunity rather than tearing out from books. So, of course, I was a persona non grata for the rest of the week. I lived with it. But it is very scary.
It sounds yeah.
And I also want to point out the mega churches. I've been to them also, and there's one huge one here. And this whole thing of, you know, if you believe in Jesus and you follow, you will have riches. So that whole economy thing. And the other thing that was very startling in the video was that they have like almost like Bibles, and they teach these people how to disseminate this misinformation. So it's very scary.
Victoria, you were saying something?
I said it sounds like Sharia law.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was shocked by the fact that they've been working at this since 1979. And so it's slowly building, and it's very deliberate. And what we feel happened with Donald Trump was not an accident. They've just been grooming these, politicians that are sympathetic and pushing them forward.
And our new Supreme Court justice.
That's one of their big things. Yeah.
And the message they're getting is like, I have a cousin that Trump was sent by God, that he's one of the messengers of God. Can you imagine?
Jose, what did you think?
Well, I've been seeing these things for 40 years plus. And all I can say is outside of the United States, when I was over there, people are amazed how gullible people can be and how much money they keep sending to these people. Luckily, in a way, they're so corrupt that once in a while, one of them gets caught. Like, what was his name? I can't remember the couple. There was a couple of them, and they get caught up with, very earthly things like a
Pride.
And so luckily for us, they get exposed, and they have private jet. What was the guy that wanted the God wanted him to have a private jet, and that please give me money for it. It's amazing the gullibility of people, and the only way we're gonna get out of this with time is through education, through a very serious effort to counteract this via educating our kids, everywhere, even in rural areas or small town. But I mean, there is a Catholic organization called the Opus Dei. Everybody knows about it, no? Right? Which is very similar. And they groom people. They con people by bringing around with excuses like study groups or something like that. And when I was in college, they had private institutions where they gathered them and they accustomed them to a certain lifestyle of quote unquote sacrifices, but join with people with money. And they depend on each other because they try to aim for like directors of banks, finances, politics, these kinds of things. So this is very, very similar in a way. And it just goes to show you 70 million people are gullible enough to vote for this idiot. 70 million. And they're still protesting out there. They're still believing all these things about, they got stolen. I have seen a pamphlet in Miami where they were trying to gather people up in Doral or something, that they're stealing our election via the ballot box. Hello, a ballot box is a vote. Anyway.
I just got an email. I have this soccer. My kids used to be in soccer, and we meet all kinds of people. And one of them sent me, "Hello, friends. This is a fundraiser for a pro-life nonprofit organization where my daughter is working, et cetera, et cetera." So like every week she sends me something, and they're very active on all levels. It's shocking. And I think chapter 12, when you get to it, Duncan, I sort of leafed through the whole thing, and they talk about how in international meetings they make they find their cohorts in other countries, and Eastern Europe and Russia have been quite prominent in their finding comrades, so to speak. So it's not an accident that we have those relations with Russia, I think, through the right wing also. Judith, what did you think?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I'm just wondering about how things are up here in Canada, actually. I've been thinking about it, and I'm not really sure. Do you have any feelings? I mean, in terms of what's going up here, up here?
No? You mean what's happening
No.
in Canada?
Yeah, yeah.
Tell us.
No. I'm just thinking about it. I can't say anything right now. I was wondering.
My cousin lives in Nelson, Canada. And
Sorry?
my cousin lives in Nelson, Canada.
In British Columbia, yeah.
And she says that Canadians look at it and think that we're nuts.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. I'm in Montreal, and obviously the university I'm at and the people I'm around, of course, we're all looking south. But there must be stuff going on up here in Canada also. I haven't looked into it. I'm just thinking about it now.
Well, in Quebec, they've got the whole sort of extreme secularism.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
That's
So
the other side.
So you're not allowed to wear any kind of religious paraphernalia if you're in public office.
That's right. You can't. That's right.
How do they
Yeah,
handle
you can't. Sorry?
How do they handle people wearing balaclavas in the winter? Like, that's a hijab too.
Well, there's been a tremendous humor in the newspapers about it, of course. You know, you can't cover your face, but everyone covers their face in the winter, and it's quite absurd, actually. Yeah, so we have the opposite in Quebec.
Does anyone have any ideas as to how this? I think they're just continuing to organize. Just because Trump lost this round doesn't mean they're not going to come back. So I don't know.
No, getting ready. Yeah, they are getting ready for it. I think he's right. I think it's education. I think we have to really be mindful that, you know, this is the most important thing that I think that makes our cultures kind of, I hate to say like a melting pot. I always call it a nice salad because all the diversity. I remember another time I was in an airplane and I had just run a program at the UU congregation for Haiti, actually, because they were having issues with earthquakes and so forth. And I was speaking to the gentleman next to me, and I was so pleased because we had done this wonderful fundraiser for Doctors Without Borders to send them money to help in the earthquake. And he was furious with me. He says, you're part of the problem. This is why we have so many people coming here and so many people from different countries. We should close our borders. And I thought, oh my God, you know, right here in an airplane, I'm sitting next to a man. And so they do exist. And I thought, well, since you hang with people who are liberal and who have, you know, views about world love, all of a sudden you find yourself that not the whole world loves you. And that there's a lot of very angry people out there. Yeah. And that was the end of our conversation too. How do you do it? How do you influence people who do not want to be influenced? Like Duncan said, they're into this whole power thing, and they think women have gained too much power, that the gays and they're going to ruin our world, and that you have to manage the children. But what are they going to do with all these children that are born they're not wanted? I mean, nobody ever deals with that. You know, they don't want Planned Parenthoods. They're okay. They don't want to, you know, support abortion, but they also don't want to support institutions. I mean, it's all so confused. And you wonder if these people band together under this thing that God will save them. So it's just, me, it's unfathomable, but you do have to do it through education. I don't see any other way. And the media that they use, because they have very, like you say, radio. I found out that the radio, because I often wondered why the Hispanics went the direction. They don't really, you know, they confused socialism with totalitarianism and dictatorship because they were preaching against something happening, which was democracy. And they were going to be putting in place something that was almost going to be becoming totalitarian. And they didn't understand. So I think that the media is so important nowadays. And you did say radio, and there has to be a lot of education in the world. People who speak up, that we don't remain silent. When people go in front of churches with Bibles and say, you know, I'm here, I'm the Word of God. No, you have to be very mindful, even though maybe you're not going to be very popular in certain surroundings. You can't keep your mouth shut.
The UU came up with the motto this year, UU Miami, or was it last year, Selva? I'm not sure, but Keepers of the Dream. So
Yeah.
I don't know what the dream is, but that dream needs to be like in Technicolor and thrown out there, made available, because people, I think, don't have that dream right now. And the religious right is sort of stepping into that vacuum.
I don't know, because my son-in-law is a truck driver, and he has a Catholic background, and he's not a college graduate. So, but he's very well read, and he reads a lot. And he broke away from Catholicism, and yet he was so furious that Trump didn't win. And his argument was that the United States was losing its value, its conscience, that people were just doing horrible things with drugs, etc. And it's because we don't have religion. And I thought, he doesn't have religion. What is he talking about? So people have a very strange way of feeling the way they feel, but he felt that we need structure. Maybe that's why so many people, wanted the so-called strong leader, a big bully, so that they had parameters. I don't really quite understand the dynamics of it, but the pundits are exploring it, and they're finding, like this video, which was very good. It showed that they have been organizing for a long time, and they're doing it in a very structured way, bombarding, the media, not just the internet, but radio, which has a large population of Spanish speakers and other speakers of languages, and so forth. So we just have to be mindful and speak up.
Duncan?
Our
To
democracy.
Selva's point, PBS had last night, and then a week before that, and it's like an ongoing series, so there'll be 2 or 3 more installments of this, Nazi Germany. And I know quite a bit about how Hitler took over and so forth. I read Mein Kampf in original German, and I've talked to a lot of people, but this was still an eye-opener because they showed how Hitler had done this, and he'd worked his way between this between the president, who was an aristocrat, who had the power to dismiss sort of the prime minister, which Hitler had become, and how Himmler had worked his way up from being a captain of the in Munich of the police, and he'd worked his way up by doing lateral moves up north and giving presents to people and so forth. He'd worked himself into the sort of the chief of police for all of Germany, and how Goering was a big loudmouth and kind of a jovial Bavarian type, but he had, he not only became the air minister after they got themselves an Air Force, but he was in conflict with Himmler, and so you're seeing a lot of these nuts and bolts of the thing, and things are connected in a very fascinating way. And so it was last night. So that was Tuesday, and there'll be another one next week, and I think another one after that, and that would be an interesting thing to see. I think sometimes you can't get all of this from newspapers. You need kind of a more fully integrated approach to this to understand the truth. When this Jonestown thing happened back in the 70s with this preacher from Indianapolis that took his disciples out to California, and then they moved from there to Suriname. I think it was Suriname, and anyway, into the jungle, and then he was crushing these people's will and making them more and more slaves when he got them there, where they were isolated. And there was a California congressman that was looking into this as an investigative legislator, is what he was. He was, and actually his presence there brought this thing to a head. And that's when Jones had gotten everyone, and he got them to march down the aisle with armed guards on the side to drink the cyanide-laced Kool-Aid, where they ended that thing with a mass suicide. And that was back in '73. I wanted to or thereabouts, 75 or 76, something. I was still fairly young. I mean, in my early 30s, I guess. And I wanted to understand, how could you get people to do that voluntarily or semi-voluntarily to march down there? I mean, mothers with their kids, you know, would be giving this Kool-Aid to them and having them drink it, making sure they had drunk it, and they'd drink it themselves. And they'd all go off a few steps away from the altar there and collapse and die in a heap of people. And that got me thinking, that's where I decided at that age that people are one of our big liabilities is that we are followers. And this has been bolstered by other things. I've said this in this forum before. I think like 80% of the people. It's not my opinion. I mean, it's somewhere in this number you can find from studies of psychology that 80% of the people are basically they follow rather than thinking for themselves. And so that social and that herd instinct is so deep. Well, when you get isolated communities and where there isn't a lot of good central healthy intercourse from more civilized, more intellectually developed places, it's easy to get that happening like out west in Wyoming and Montana and places. And so I mean, you have that as an explanation, you know, for why this happens. And then the standard of education is low there. And I mean, we've been taught about history of our country in school, but if you go and ask, if you ask people, is the president of the United States, is he a commander in chief of the whole nation? What do you think the answer would be? I mean, I've never seen this experiment carried out or the results from it, but I would bet that 70-80% of the people think that the commander-in-chief is the commander-in-chief of the whole nation. You know, whereas the Constitution says that he's only the commander-in-chief of the military. And in time of war, it's what I learned at the age of 13 when we were studying the Constitution. And that's we're a democracy we're a democracy, but we're not a full democracy like they had in ancient Greece, because we won't go kill our admirals that have lost the naval battle by show of hands. They're traitors or they're cowardly. We won't go and have them executed. There's a Bill of Rights here that there have to be processes for these judicial processes. I don't think people know that. They get their high school diploma, but they don't really know these realities about what the Constitution says and what's holding us together.
Maybe people, because they're working 2-3 jobs, they don't have the time to read. And so these, you know, populations that are brutalized would, you know, go to some place to belong, and those institutions give them a version of reality or a myth that they can cling on to and get emotional about and feel that they belong. But how to counteract it? I mean, through education, but how?
Yeah, I agree. This is very difficult.
It's quite a dilemma, and you know, the separation of church and state, to me, it's an absolute. Once they start putting in there, you know, thou shalt not, and this, and putting in these absolutes into education, we really will be in trouble. Having, you know, herding sheep, people, you know, the people willing to do anything that a leader tells them to do. I mean, I think that's the whole beauty of our Constitution. We have so many systems of checks and balances, and people have to be, and that's why I think these elections were really very, very exciting, even though the person who's our leader was very divisive. If that hadn't been, it would show that people did go out and they do understand that they have a right to speak out, and they don't have to be sheep. So I think that it did have a positive, and unfortunately, because of our leadership, it's diluting the democratic process by not allowing transition to take place. So we have to be very mindful of that and support that. And I mean, I think that we the people, we're the ones who have to go out there and in my family, my grandkids, we're all leaning towards, and I'm not a party person, I'm independent, but they were leaning towards a person, who was a very strong political figure. I don't want to mention his name. I don't want to defame anyone publicly, but they have now learned to read behind the makeup and the hairdos.
So, I mean, grandma is doing her bit for educating her grandkids. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Jose, you wanted to say something, right?
Yeah. Here's the dilemma. We are humans in this world, and we grow up, and we see things, and things happen to us, and life is a little hard sometimes, very hard for some people sometimes. We have this consciousness that tell us, oh, maybe there is something out there. There gotta be something better, and from uneducated people of the millennia past, you look at geographical accidental things like a volcano or the sun moving or something like that, and it's so beyond our scale of humans that we endow those things with some kind of godly power or godly attributes. So we have had a tendency for millennia of looking at things beyond us, and it follows, like you were saying about the 80%. People have a vacuum. People have something that they need to fill, and religion unfortunately provides a nice tale where if you do this or you do that, you will be saved, right? So the Catholics have been the primary purveyors of this myth of the other life. And it's very hard for a lot of people to admit all we have is what we have, what we interact with each other, what we see, and that's it. So what do we do in a separation of religion and state to fill that void where, I mean, those of us who are interested in arts or intellectual pursuit or creative, let's see, we have an advantage, in my opinion, to think in those terms. But what about whoever doesn't have that? And what do we do? Because that's where these churches exploit in order to promise greatness. And you could see in mega churches, you could see people, going in ecstasies and that kind of thing. So I just don't have the answer. If I had the answer, I would be rich. But there is that longing for something beyond us. And that's what the exploitation comes in. Lots of people don't have an answer, don't have, they have a void in their consciousness. Anyway,
that's true. It's a big job because you can alternate. You can make compassion part of it, because I know my brother and I had arguments when I was growing up, because I would say extreme nationalism in any form breeds hate. And you say, how could you say that? Are you anti-American? I said, no, I'm not anti-American. I see anything that's taken to an extreme and isolates others and separates us is not good. You have to really understand the dynamics that everyone has to have a share in what you're doing, and compassion can be taught in schools rather than, elitism, which is what sometimes we do teach. I mean, we do teach that, elite schools are the ones that are premium. We want our kids to be in private schools because the public schools are not good enough. we teach kids to honor power. So we do, and it's a very, very, very difficult job. You're absolutely right. And sometimes false prophets jump up and fill that void and tell them, if you do this, you're going to be in heaven and you're going to be rewarded and you're going to have a home up there. Maybe you're going to have 7 wives waiting for you, maybe 7 husbands if you're a feminist.
Muslims have 72, no? Where is that number coming from? But on another side of it, a good use of religion is to create a sense of ethics in people, and be good for maybe for the sake of being good, and most people find rewarding helping others, and so solving problems of others and charitable things. But of course, how do we communicate to people that being a good person and ethical has nothing to do with religion? Mm-hmm. But it is a tool to create and educate people in good societal manners and attitudes and so forth.
Victoria?
Well, I can't remember the name of the commentator that cried the other day on the news and said that it's now easier to be a parent without Donald Trump, because how can you teach ethics with an example of a bully, of a con man bully?
Yeah, they make excuses. I mean, for somebody who's stolen from New York, for somebody who's cheated on taxes, and yet people, oh well, that's they like that strength. I mean, I think to your point, people do have a void and they want to fill it somehow. And to your point also, the economy is not great, and so people are more concerned with having food or having a job. So it's a huge, huge task. But I'm not.
But it's not poor people. I mean, my sister is wealthy, and she is a born again Christian, and she just joined this thing called City of Grace or something. I don't know what it is, but she believes all this crap.
Yeah, no. That has. I mean, they believe at least the mega churches that I've been to, they preach well. In other words, if you do that, if you follow them, wealth is something you should have, not sharing it so much, but sharing it with the person who's running these mega churches. But
she doesn't belong to a mega church. She belongs to a little local church, and she just buys all this crap.
But she doesn't give to her community at all. She doesn't have charities, and
she tithes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge undertaking, but I feel very rewarded because I take somebody like Daniela Levine Cava, who I know personally, and she's a really good, kind person. In the middle of all this and all the dynamics and all the hate, she was able to turn Miami around and become our mayor. And I thought she did all the right things. I mean, she spoke out to the people, she didn't lie. And I think that we need more people like that, but it's hard. I mean, I think sometimes when people get into power, it corrupts them. So it's very hard. And our democracy has been built on people willing to transition and willing to share power. And I think when you get these people that become, it's like Castro at the beginning, he was a savior in Cuba. He was, wonderful. People were applauding him. He was overthrowing, a person who was a dictator. And then all of a sudden he got power and he became no longer a man of the people. He was a dictator. So it's like power corrupts, and how we as a society, that's why we have to really be very vigilant of our democracy. We are a sample to the world. And I do think it's so important that we all do our part.
Duncan, you brought in something special.
Yeah, when Jose was talking about religion in the beginning, and as a source of morals, and so forth. And that brought me to this. I'm not sure if I recommended this book in the last time or not. It was by Arthur Koestler.
Okay.
He was an intellectual back in the 1950s. Wrote a book called Darkness at Noon, which is kind of a novel dissecting, shining the light on the bad things of Stalinism and communism. And this book is called The Sleepwalkers, and this was about a year or two after that. It was like 1962 or so. This is a library copy, but I got this from a friend, the suggestion, and I got it from Kindle, and this was the story of how we learned that we were not the center of the universe, but rather that we're orbiting the sun with Kepler, Copernicus and Kepler, and Galileo. And as Koestler was he was an intellectual, and he was a very free-spirited and wide-thinking person. And what comes from reading this book, one of his central themes in this that he comes back to a few times, but he doesn't pound it in the point in too hard, and that is that science and religion, the two are diametrically opposed in his and in everyone else's mind too, because the religion is taking things as absolute truths. Why? Because they were declared by God to people who lived 2,000 years or more ago. And they're doing it by this authority and by the momentum that you have with all these people believing it and the power structure around it. And there's at least a semblance of morals from the religion. And then on the other hand, you have the science, which is constantly finding new things, finding new ways to cure disease and a better understanding of things, even turning its a mirror on ourselves and letting us see how what some of our foibles are, like the 80% and the simplistic thinking and not having too much hope in things and thinking that we're immortal and it can't happen to us, like the people that don't wear the masks and so forth. Science can turn the mirror on us and show us these things too. So there's a big tension between these two, and obviously these people we're talking about today, I mean, these are the ones, they just go by religion, and they have the hope of heaven too, which is sort of like, a double or nothing. If it doesn't work out here, it'll work out twice as good there because you've been a saint for having suffered through all this. And Koestler doesn't disparage the religion or want to throw it out, though. He thinks that the religion just should be, like Einstein thought, should be retreating. We should taking steps back as science makes progress and shows things that are irrefutable, and that can't be ignored anyway. And he thinks that the religion and then the sort of the cousin of religion, metaphysics, having these explanations of things that go beyond the facts that we actually know. But these metaphysical though explanations, they do help to move things along, including science. And he shows that how 2 out of the 3 of these cosmologists, how 2 out of 3 of them, I mean, they were driven and wouldn't have gotten where they'd gotten if it hadn't been for their metaphysical ideas. So yes, Jose, you're the one that triggered me actually to want to bring this book here. You said people, they want to have something to believe. They have to have something to believe. And so the religion's supplying this, and when science doesn't, and when the scientists don't speculate and use Socratic type approach to the rest of the world that's outside of their direct expertise, if they're not willing to speculate on these fruits of science, then you're leaving, leaving your patch of ground there that's ready to grow weeds of religion if you don't. So this Chrysler, he was pretty clear on that, from these two sides, that you needed something in the center of that. And I think that's a very strong humanist, should be a very strong humanist point that could be made, all of the time. I mean, the people, they say I'm an atheist, I belong to the atheist society, and we just love to make fools of you and disparage you hicks out there in the country. But they don't offer anything else that's any better, I mean, it makes these people feel bad then about it. I mean, just like, I saw Jerry Lewis one time in the late 80s or so, no, early 80s it must have been. And he was on the Johnny Carson show, and he said, "Oh, I just had a great experience. I was in an airliner and I pissed on Mississippi from the airliner, flying coast to coast." I mean, that makes them feel pretty bad, and so that's been part of our problem too. So when approaching these people, I mean, it has to be with understanding and love. So you can't be with a stick or disparagement, because it'll just drive them further.
But what this Katherine Stewart is saying, that, there are huge segments of the population that, don't have time to think or get educated, or they're not offered education or whatever it is. But she said this is a new elite that's manipulating people through, targeted political action. So she said it's not just automatic that they would necessarily gravitate towards religion that sees God as king. It's a deliberate attempt. It's a strategy to capture their minds. So I think that's a big point that she makes. Yeah,
you manipulate their symbols, and so the symbol is abortion. Abortion's the biggest crime. No discussion about how much the fetus can feel at 2 months, 3 months, or whatever. Whether it's like a muscle cramp or or something, a piece of gangrenous intestine is dying. No discussion about that. I mean, and at what point is it really part of God? Does it have intelligence? Can you draw a picture of it on a billboard and not be lying to people? They don't have any. There's no discussion of that, and it should be. So they manipulate that with the abortion, then the sex, the sexual liberation of Sodom and Gomorrah, and I think sexual liberation takes a little bit of imagination. I mean, if a person's born with it, they might tend to be more liberated than if they weren't born with it. And but I mean, these authoritarian people are notoriously unimaginative. So I mean, if they think anyone's getting any pleasure or deriving any general feelings of fulfillment in a way that they can't do it, then there's going to be jealousy with that. Okay, so they can manipulate that. Name me two or three more of these symbols they can manipulate. I mean, that's what they're doing. They don't really care that the people. When push came to shove, it was when Trump had this groping, bragging thing that he did on TV, and he thought he was lost with that too when that became public. But the evangelicals, they just
they're forgiving. They forgive. That's their thing, is to forgive.
That's true. They could forgive that, but I didn't hear any formal forgiveness from anyone, or I didn't hear Joel Osteen coming out and saying, "Well, I mean, you must be okay, and his soul's really okay because look at all that prosperity that God gave him."
The manipulative the manipulative aspect of this political attack is, Stewart shows it up in one of her chapters, how Republicans weren't against abortion. Even Ronald Reagan passed a law that was very pro, choice, and Barry Goldwater as well. And it wasn't not until Phyllis Schlafly came along and said, hey, you know what? If we put this forward, that might actually unite everybody. So it wasn't like they grew up hating abortion, or in fact, they accepted it and promoted it. I think I don't know if it was Goldwater's wife who was head of Planned Parenthood at the time, but they just find the symbol and contort it. So, it's not even a natural geysering up of their true emotions. It's so manipulated. Let's see what symbols can be used so that we can acquire power and keep these people voting for us through the churches. It's nasty.
Yes, it is.
Guys, I'm going to have to go, but I've really enjoyed this. Do you meet weekly?
Once a month on the third Wednesday. Thank you for coming. I think I've seen you at UU, right?
I'm in California.
Oh, so where have I seen you? Maybe at one of the Zoom sessions?
No, I don't know. I a couple of years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I was at UU, occasionally with Ray. But anyway, guys, I do.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, and I'm going to read that book.
Okay. So
Okay.
I guess this is it. We're probably all going to step down.
Yeah, I wanted to ask how many of you have seen the 26-minute video, because I haven't. I thought it was going to be played here in the beginning and we'd be discussing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I should have played it.
That's okay, but I just wondered, are some of you haven't seen it yet?
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it. Well, I'm going to see it.
Yeah, it's a good resume. And
But it sounds the same as the Republican Party has been working for the last 10 years, redistricting the voting counties and all that, promoting the legislators, promoting the governor. I mean, that's another purposeful work they have been doing for 10 years in all their meetings to promote their people and to try to suppress the rest of us.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing in different aspects.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of it, actually, of the book. The parts that I read in the preface to the thing is that this movement to nationalize religion as it is. I mean, to get that as a handle, you can manipulate people with. That has infected the Republican Party. It's taken over the Republican Party, and Ms. Stewart said that the Democrats could not ever make enough concessions to this movement to ever rob them of any of their votes or influences that they've gotten so far. In other words, there's a certain portion of the populace is susceptible to this, and the Republicans have gone with that in this religious conspiracy thing, and the Republicans will never extricate themselves from it now.